When I returned to Jesus, he was still communicating with the half circle of creation and the children of God. I kneeled before him once again, and I started thanking him again for what he had done for me. As I was thanking Jesus, I looked at the Father on the throne. I seemed close to the throne of God at that moment. I could see very close to everything that was taking place at the throne. I experienced the love, the life, and the great light coming from God the Father. All I knew was he was big, large, huge, vast. He's unmeasurable. There's no end to him, you know. I can remember coming back here and people asked me, how big is God? And I would try to grasp it in my thinking. And I thought if I speed up my thinking, that maybe I could grasp and tell people how big he is. And I can remember my head saying, if you keep that up, you're going to have the worst headache you ever had. The brightness of who he is was the glory of who he is. Out of all the glory came rainbows of many, many colors coming off of him, and every color was alive. What was he sitting on? A cloud of great glory and joy. I knew at that moment the cloud was his throne. He sits on a cloud. I experienced that he sit on the throne. He is the throne. In front of the throne was something like water. It was like the crystal, but very much alive. It was living. It was living water. It was living creation of God. Now, after this liquid, there was another liquid, and it was like liquid fire. I saw Abraham. He would go down to the liquid fire, pick up some of it, and hold it up to the Father, and the Father would smile at him. I knew it was pure worship from Abraham to God the Father. The throne of God was hovering over this liquid fire. Around the throne was a great many of his creation. Great many of his children were giving him praise. I saw them moving around the throne. In the atmosphere was all these beings, or what we call angels. And around the Father they were saying, great all, how holy he is. But they were so small compared to him. I knew right away I was made after his likeness, in his image. Many people always ask me, what does he look like? And it's hard for me to bring him down to our level and say he looks human. We look like him. Again, the joy of experiencing the knowledge of being made in his image rose up in me. Knowing he does not look human, but that we look like him, which is above looking human. Oh boy. I was his son. I looked like his son. I knew I was redeemed by Jesus for him. I knew that I could call him Father. I heard us that are redeemed or people there, we would call him Father. Everything else there would call him the Word. There was nothing to stop me from experiencing the Father's love. I didn't have my flesh there. It was here on this planet. I was spirit and soul. I didn't have it in the way to give me any input in what I should accept and what I shouldn't accept. You know, I didn't have no limitations to me. So I could experience the fullness of the love of God because I didn't have this here giving any input. Wow. I looked into his eyes. He looked at me as a son and smiled. I experienced the love of the Father God in pure joy, life, and truth. I knew that everything he created for me was his way of saying, I love you. I knew I was number one with him. I also knew that all of his children were number one with him. I experienced how valuable I am to him. I knew how valuable everyone was to him. I understood how all of creation approached the Father. No one questioned him. No one doubted him. I remember hearing some of the creation said, he God, and they would move on. Whatever he said, whatever he would speak or command, no one would come and second guess him. They would just say, he God, and move on. They didn't have to understand everything, and I understood that. They just had to know what he wanted them to know. They would say, he God, and move on. As I was sitting, better yet, as I was kneeling before Jesus, I looked at the throne of God, and I could see the prayers people were praying. They were moving fast and still looking like shooting stars. The atmosphere had millions upon millions of the prayers coming, and I saw them entering into God the Father. I knew at that moment that our prayers were coming into God. I knew that two types of prayers were being prayed. One prayer was this, people that were praying, and they knew the will of God, and they were praying from that point of view. And then there were people that were praying with everything they had. They didn't know a whole lot, but what they knew, they were praying from. And what got me there is he was acting like they knew everything. I knew that once they reached him, they entered into him, and he became our prayers, and our prayers became him. I knew he remembered every prayer. It's hard for me to talk about this and stand here still, because I'm experiencing it even as I'm telling you what's going on. I knew he remembered every prayer. Every prayer. I knew our prayers did not have a shelf life. These are prayers that are coming from a pure heart, and I knew it. God is wanting to hear from a pure heart. I came to understand at that moment of being in heaven that he is the only God who had the authority to answer prayers. This was understood because he is the only God who can hear prayers. Also, there was this great joy in knowing he is the only one who can do something about prayers anywhere. I knew because he is, and he is always will be, the answers to our prayers. I knew because he would communicate to Jesus around the prayers. I understood that Jesus became the answer to our prayers. There was a longing that I experienced when I was looking at the Father in that he wanted to hear from his children. There is a special place for everybody's voice that's his children, and he wants to hear from them.